you. I really appreciate all the work that your nonprofit organizations, for lack of a better word today, are doing. I know you're doing great work because I'm working side by side with you. I'm a field practitioner. I'm an international development consultant, and my largest successes have come from working with the NGOs in their own countries, trusting their own instincts. My question to all of you today is, how can we shift more funds directly to them without passing through all of the other layers of hands? Tell us what to do. You have an audience of 600 to mobilize today.
Let me tackle this, because unfortunately I think the trends are actually heading in the opposite direction. And in
exactly
many ways, our government, for its resources, has adopted a primarily contractor mode of doing things. And it requires from the donors a recognition that it is the infrastructure on the ground that is ultimately about development. In many ways, the organizations here serve as intermediary organizations. There's no, so most nonprofits, in essence, work through a local community-based organization. But it gets back to the question of the allocation of resources. How many donors give resources for the building of capacity of local institutions in the developing world? No, it's for the delivery of a well or the delivery of a health system. Now, the nonprofits tend to put resources aside because you don't do it yourself directly. You always do it through another institution. But that is a slow process over time. And unfortunately, I think our government, because of the lack of investment in foreign assistance, bundles resources in large $100 million entities, which certain institutions could handle, but it is not the partnership with civil society that we would like to see.
Think tank, some way to get more policy dialogue on the issues so that we get it to the grassroots faster.
Bill, you wanted to comment?
I think this actually is happening in a very healthy way at the moment. If you look beyond the those two categories, you have huge flows. For example, immigrant populations sending funds back, and much more important, people in these societies raising money for their own organizations. The building of a citizen base, if I can suggest a word, citizen organization, citizen movement, etc. What is a really smart investment, of course, is helping that process develop. How can we help citizen organizations across the world build a broad citizen base of money, people, information in and out, and captive business? That's where 95% of the resources has to come from. You still need institutional funding for startup and specialist functions, but I predict that within 5 years that's going to be done predominantly through the for-profit finance sector because it's so much more efficient. And it's just we've got to work out the retail mechanisms to make that work.
I think there is a real challenge with the standard operating procedures of most of the institutional donors. In my experience, real grassroots development of local institutions and creating capacities, again, at national scale is a 25 or 30-year process. And so, the 1 to 3 year grant cycle does not allow the kind of outcomes that you're describing to take place. The kinds of objective setting that flows within that doesn't allow the kind of outcomes to take place. I mean, we have a relationship with the Gates Foundation on reducing newborn mortality, and 4.5 million newborns die every single year. And that's not that is not an issue that's going to go away in 3 years. And they really said, number one, how do you solve the problem? And it was about grassroots institutions. How long will it take? What countries will it take place in, and how much will it cost? And they basically have signed on to a 25 to 40 year program, and that allows, and then we don't need big overhead takes on that kind of a relationship and program and so on and so forth. So 95% of the funds go to the local institutions, but there is the sharing of best practices and so on and so forth on a global basis. But for all of us who are in the international nonprofit world, that's like dying and going to heaven, and it's a once-in-a-lifetime experience.
Yeah.